Hey, welcome back to Reality's Edge, the Doc and Buddy show. We are so glad to have you here. Sorry for a slight delay. We had some technical difficulties, but we're here now. Buddy, are you with us?
I am indeed, Doc. It is a pleasure to be with you as always.
Yep.
Tonight, again, we're going to dive deep into reality and go right to the edge.
Right to the edge, folks. Are you ready to go to the edge? I think you are. You wouldn't be here right now. I can see your chat here. So, hey, Super Sleuth, what's going on?
Super, we love
We've got Shambhala Institute and Julie. All our favorite people are here tonight.
That's awesome. Awesome. Wonderful news.
Yeah. So, you know what we wanted to do? Buddy and I were just talking about this essay from Luis Elizondo from the TTSA group in Medium. I tweeted it a couple days ago. And then we just wanted to get maybe into some of your questions. And I will handle that. It requires two computers to do this chat. You can't even do it from iPad or mobile. It has to be another unit, desktop unit, laptop. And that's what we've got going on here. So this to start off with, this was we haven't heard from TTSA in a while, and I don't know what's going on with them, Buddy. Maybe you have something you can share, but we did get something from Luis Elizondo, which was they've discovered quantum mechanics.
It was whenever he speaks, it's interesting. You know, he's so cagey, and it seems like the most pertinent thing he always says, or the most pertinent thing to come out of any conversation with him or any speech that he makes, is what he can't tell us. You know, that's always seems to be the most interesting. In this letter to the public, I guess, in this discussion, he really went into some of the nuts and bolts, which was very unusual. He went into some of the quantum physics of this stuff, and that some of this weirdness is real, and we need to get used to it. And our reality is about to change. And I think this is we need to take this as a forebearer of what's going to come. We should listen to what he's saying, because I think reality is going to change a lot for people coming up soon. It's not what we think. It's more flexible than we've ever thought. Doc, we've talked about the structure of reality and being very different. And I think we're going to find out soon. We've got some friends out there, and we've got more abilities than we ever thought. And reality is very weird.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a lot of interesting reactions to that article too. I mean, who are these guys? Like, are they telling us, like, we're going to tell you about UFOs, just what we feel we can tell you. And what we're going to tell you right now is it's real. Okay, guys, it's real. That article said it was real. Oh, yeah. Again, it is real. And they're looking at quantum teleportation, entanglement, and who knows what else. But the interesting thing about Buddy, and for all of you watching, I mean, I'm not putting Luis down for saying this. I don't mean this in a negative way, but he starts off the whole article about why we need secrecy. I mean, we've had 70 years of secrecy. I mean, here's another article. It's like Project Blue Book 2.
There is dangerous information out there, but you know what? Maybe the people have a right in a democracy to know that information. And I don't think it's some people's right to say what's good and bad necessarily for all of society, because maybe they're wrong, and maybe society is being denied an incredible opportunity to learn. You know, we've talked about the danger of suppressing this information. There could come a time where this information cannot be suppressed anymore. An event could happen, and society would be very poorly adjusted for the possibility of what could happen. Society could have a worse reaction because we haven't been prepared. And I think it's great.
Well said. Well said. Yeah.
That the DoD released this stuff, and we need to keep, letting people know what, I have a park over here called Galileo. We're not the center of the universe. We keep thinking we are, and we need to change that. In many ways, we're about to grow up.
No, very well said, Buddy. By the way, this article, it's on medium.com, and I put it in my Twitter stream a couple days ago. You can just look there. You got my Twitter. It's on newcrystalmind.com. There's a Twitter stream inside. Yeah, Buddy, that is so well said, because the article is written from the point of view that we can control, the government can control the release of this info, and that they're in control. Listen, guys, I'm going to mention again, I was in Vienna in 1989, a couple of months before the Soviet, the wall came down, the Berlin Wall, and then shortly thereafter, a couple of years after the Soviet Union ended. I mean, you are not always in control of these things, and I think there's a danger. You're not the only one to say this. None other than Hal Puthoff told us this at SSC Irva, that there is a danger that if this information stays compartmentalized, we're all going to lose, because we're not going to understand what it is. And this phenomena can show itself at any time, as evidenced by the Phoenix lights, the Belgium sightings in the 80s, the Hudson Valley lights, which isn't very far from where you are. Yep. I know in Black Swan Ghosts, there's a witness who saw it right from the Bronx, buddy, over the Hudson River, with a whole bunch of other people. So this phenomena is not something we're in control of, and yet the article basically says we can't release these secrets because it has defense significance. I just don't know where I mean, like this quantum mechanics is 100 years old at this point. So okay, we at least 1905 really is the beginning. Albert Einstein with his paper about photoelectric effect. That's black body radiation. That's where it's quantized. It's not linear. It goes in bloops and bloops, and little particles come out, and that's what Einstein actually invented quantum mechanics without even realizing it. So this is old at this point, but
it is.
I think, I don't know what to do with it. Go ahead.
To me, it's so frustrating, Doc, because we are like that 17-year-old who's getting the car keys, and all these responsibilities have to come at once. And they want to say that you only get one of these responsibilities at a time, and it doesn't work that way. This is a package deal. It's no coincidence that top aerospace executives have talked about consciousness and the power of ESP. Doc, we've been talking about this substructure of the universe. It's a real physical substructure. This fractal physical substructure that RV prevents secrets from being. It prevents secrets. It gives everyone the power. There is a substructure that gives everyone the power to connect with everything. And it's
true. It's true.
And some of these companies know these formulas already. And there's research, and this information deserves to be in the public's hands. And Doc, I think it's no coincidence that we've seen the fractal model. We understand how this fractal model fits in so many different ways so well. And even explains a lot of things that haven't been explainable previously. And this information, the power of consciousness, all of this information, extraterrestrials, we are at a very dangerous point in civilization. And maybe human beings need every bit of potential we possibly could have in order to survive in the future. So if these bastards think they're helping us, they could be preventing us from actually surviving as a species during our most dangerous time. We need every bit of our potential, Doc.
No, it's absolutely right. We need the RV potential. We need to understand the quantum resonance structure, which you and I have been talking about. And you did, we had a little exchange a couple weeks ago where you talked about about a week ago about Ben Rich. Remember Ben Rich at that famous meeting? Where was he? Was at a college somewhere, and
he had
a graduation. And he said, you have to understand ESP before you understand UFOs. And also, who also said this? Dr. Eric Walker. When people started following up Wilbert Smith's information from Canada, and people started calling around, they ended up with Dr. Eric Walker because apparently Sarbacher was no longer around, one of the people that Wilbert B. Smith mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And then someone called Dr. Eric Walker, and he said to them exactly what Ben Rich said. He said, do you understand ESP? Because if you don't understand ESP, you have no hope of understanding the UFO phenomena. We know these things have been connected all the way back to the 60s. I don't know why we find ourselves here, folks, 50 years later, 60 years later, and we're still being told it's a secret. But we know it has something to do with quantum mechanics. Let's keep reinventing the wheel every day. This is what Al meant is we need to start having meetings about this in every town. So when this starts happening, people don't panic and just go off the rails. I mean, it's getting pretty close to midnight at this point. The clock ticking.
And this substructure, it's like denying people a sense, one of their natural senses. It's like saying you cannot see, you don't have the right to see, or you don't have the right to hear. All conscious beings have a connection to this. And advanced civilizations understand this, and because of that, advanced propulsion systems and other things are possible. And there's no coincidence. I'm working with 2 different aerospace companies. It's no coincidence. And that these aerospace companies are very concerned with this substructure. They're very concerned with how psi can reveal real mechanics of the universe, and not just remote viewing, but the ability to affect random number generators, psychokinesis. This substructure is not, and no one can own it. You can't patent the universe, Doc. And this is a gift from the universe to us. It's our human potential. This is our chance to, I think, make it against all of the different dangers that confront humanity. It's going to be a very dangerous future, and we should have all of our potential, It's amazing, Doc, what we can do if we just allow ourselves the ability to maybe fail big sometimes, and support each other. In that kind of environment, human potential is amazing. And we've talked about this, not everything, art and science, architecture, everything would be better, and we need it.
But so, buddy, just to be clear for the record, months and months ago, you did an interview with Carrie Cassidy of Project Camelot. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, buddy, who are you really working for? And then I kind of took that as a joke, and I kept joking you every episode. But it turns out you actually have been working with people who know something about this. Now, I just want to establish for the record, they don't tell you what to say. This is my understanding of working. You can say anything you want apart from very specific.
Well, I want to be very direct about this whole.
Go ahead. Please do.
First of all, I am Ronin, which means a independent samurai who is out to fight, essentially for whatever cause they believe is honorable and the right thing to do. And that's what I'm doing. And I stand by our community, our values, our highest values of doing no harm and uplifting the community and sharing and educating this information. I'm on nobody's payroll. I'm not, I've spoken very openly about GEC in Canada, an incredible company, and Sam, the owner, who I've got to know very, very well as my friend. And I know his goals and his ideals and his ethics and his honor and his humanity. And this whole project means the same thing to him as it does to us. And I think there's other people out there who are like-minded like us, who care about this stuff, but also realize it can profit for them as well, too. They're not stupid. But this is everyone's right, But anyway, I am not on anyone's payroll. I've never been hired by anyone. Me and Stephanie have lived very difficult times the past year because of things we've chosen not to do, and money we've chosen not to take. We only take, rare donations. I take no money for any of the work I do. I refuse money all the time. And, when we take money, it would only be in the form of, small donations. And people have given us donations. I'd never deny that. I'll reveal everything if anyone ever really confronted us on it. But so that's it. I'm Ronin, and I'm fighting for the people, and I'm fighting for this cause, and I'm fighting for, I believe, like you, Doc, what we're all doing, for humanity's future, and humanity's bigger potential by unlocking and giving this stuff back to the people.
Right. No, it's very well said. But okay, thanks for clearing that up, buddy. Because so you do have an insider's view on some of these that the rest of us don't, because you are in communication with, you said, 2 aerospace companies. We don't have to name it, but you're in contact with
them, with some of the top people.
Some of the top people.
Most of the top people, in a lot of ways. A lot of the top.
Most of the top people.
And some of this stuff from behind the scenes as my friend, confidant. This stuff. You know that this is not fantasy. This is not, a lot of people have a lot of stories, and the facts and the science of the stuff that I've been able to reproduce is the same stuff everyone can.
No, I should just say that you have shared with me over the past couple of weeks that you've been doing RV sessions. You've been doing some PK research. You yourself, you haven't contacted the Ghost of Ingo or Pat Price. They've asked you to do some of these. Now, just so everyone knows, I haven't seen any of the data. I've asked you, we haven't seen it yet, of some of your RV sessions, and I've seen some of the aspects of it, but not the actual data. But that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's something
we're going to get that stuff too deeply, at all right now. I just think, and I'm not going to brag or anything. I'll let the evidence speak for itself.
Yeah.
If it does, but I think what this stuff has just taught me personally is it's unequivocal. We all have amazing untapped powers, and what some may say is miraculous is normal. And exactly what Ingo told you, sitting on his stoop, that we've been acting, all of us, subnormal. And he's fucking right. We've all been acting subnormal, and humans' potential is so much bigger if we support each other and love each other and give each other the right to fail big and dream bigger. We can succeed even bigger. And you know what, Doc? I'm going to say it. I'm not going to, I'm not a fear monger, but I'm a practical, logical person. And there's a convergence of dangers, eschatological dangers approaching humanity. And we're going to face them at one time or another. And this is a crucial step humanity must make. You can't prevent a kid from getting their car keys. A kid's going to age and turn 18 no matter what. They have to accept the responsibility. And that's the time for humanity now. We can do it, Doc.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah.
We got
no, right. That's very good, buddy. Now, let me ask you this before we go to some of our questions in the chat room, okay? Mm-hmm. Based on your contact with the people that you know that are sort of the top people in this area, okay, let's be honest about it. Do they have a grasp on reality here, or is it just reality's edge in our audience? Because I often feel that there's a lot of research being done. Go ahead. I mean, do they know what's going on in a realistic way, or are they kind of in a fantasy black budget world where they get unlimited funding and they still don't have a clue what the phenomenon is?
I think some of them, a select few, really get it. Most, the whole big picture. The people that I've spoken to, most of the big names really get it, though. I think they understand. And some people have different views and perspectives, but I think they do get the power of it. They do get that there is a substructure. There's new physics that they know about and that we know about, and it's emerging, and that Psi is reflective of. And the stuff that we've talked about. You know, we talked about on the phone, we didn't talk about this in an episode, about how our universe has certain parameters that aren't physical, and we don't know where they come from. There are aspects, you know, there's waveforms and curves and laws and things that are parameters about our universe that we don't completely understand why they have certain parameters. They're distinct parameters. And, you know, when we look at this fractal model that we've talked about, if you have a lot of different choices, you know, fractals are finite. There's a bunch of them, but it's a growing formula. It's a formula for growth. And so fractals have a finite number. And maybe this substructure is indicative of some of those laws that we thought they didn't have a structure. Maybe they do actually have a structure in the amount of, you know, identical fractal similarities, or, you know, something like that. And, you know, I think when you find out some of these structures and some of these formulas, like the unlocking the power of the atom produced the atomic age and the amazing consequences of that, the consequences of going even deeper are even more powerful. These are reality bending, reality twisting, earth shaking stuff. And maybe in some ways, some people are not ready for it. But you know what? They shouldn't be denied it.
Yeah, I put up a series of videos recently just on one aspect of fractals, not exactly what you're talking about, but fractal suppression. That's as far as I've gone with those 5 videos, and I appreciate everyone's comments on them. It's what I really think is going on is when you suppress fractal expression, it has to balance out some way, and it sucks the complexity back in from other dimensions. You end up creating the very conditions you're trying to avoid. Is when you're trying to control things and turn things into flatland, you bring in a sphere, a cube, like in the book Pilot, right?
Yes, something called potential entropy. We've never kind of quantified that. We've had potential energy, but never potential entropy. Groups and cohesive groups can give up potential entropy because they're suppressing this fractal structure. And like you talked about, you're the one who taught me this. I didn't believe it at first, but you totally opened my mind to this, and it totally flipped the switch for me because I saw the empirical logic in it about how that operated with crop circles and other phenomena, this fractal flattening, and how that transference of energy is released, you know, kind of into the environment.
Thanks for. No, I just want to say that's a very good point, buddy, because flattened fields, agricultural fields, are where you see crop circles popping up, which are actually a higher dimensional expression than the field, with the wheat all standing at the same distance, at the same height from the seed driller. And some forces come in, people or UFOs, whatever does it, even whirlwinds, I've seen some of those, come in and create kind of a higher dimensional structure there. It's almost like it wants to raise back up to kind of a more higher fractal level. So crop circles is one example where you see the reverse of the flattening effect.
Yeah. And we can resonate with these different fractals, and that's why we can connect with everywhere, everything, everyone. And come on, you can't suppress this info. You can't suppress.
No, I don't. You cannot suppress it, and I don't think the universe lets you in the long run. So, I mean, it's just I'm not being just sort of syntropic about this. And you, by the way, you were the one that introduced that idea a couple weeks ago. You mentioned retrocausality, and I found a book about pair labs and syntropy. This idea that there's sort of, and in the future, there's kind of a coherency, and it kind of attracts the PK influencer into the experiment, that it sort of wants to be synchronized, bonded pairs, and all that. But I do feel, I really honestly feel, based on my experience working with people from the Soviet Union, Russians, and East Germans, and people behind the Iron Curtain in that year, 1989, the flattening does not last. It doesn't matter how, you could have the strongest totalitarian system on the planet. Nothing beat the intelligence services of the Soviet Union back then in terms of their reach and their ability to suppress their dissidents. But guess what? The dissidents won. About 100 dissidents overthrew the Soviet Union because they wouldn't be intimidated, and they had fax machines. They could communicate. They weren't taking any of this BS. Even once, even when they were imprisoned, they wouldn't give in. A lot of them, they just would turn the questions back on their interrogators, and they said, this is ridiculous. You have this repressive system. You're asking me these stupid questions from this so stupid Soviet logic, this kind of empirical materialism that they had adapted from Marxism and Leninism. These guys wouldn't put up with it, and they won. I mean, it's incredible. It's a really incredible story.
They were trying to imprison ideas, not people.
Yeah,
and
right.
Tried to do that with Mandela, and he became the president. You can imprison someone, but the truth kind of floats, and this reality floats. That's why people gravitate to us. The reason why we're working with some of the best best names, and the reason why we have some of the best fans is because I think we're onto something real here, and I think we're kind of dealing with logic here. This is we're dealing with first principles of logic. We're going from the real fundamental aspects of logic and taking it to this place. And we know that RV is real. We know the substructure is real. We know, psychokinesis and retrocausality is real. We know all these things that, to most people, they might think, gosh, the quantum effects can't, rise to this level in the macro scale, can they? Maybe they can.
Buddy, I just have to mention in this context, all good points, that Russell Targ sent out a special message with the Third Eye Spies movie from director Lance. And I put it on to my blog. I sent it out on my YouTube channel. I posted a message about it because Lance wanted to share it. So what they did is they shared some of the movie, the extras about when Russell, this is so funny, he went over there in 1984 on his own volition. And they have a little clip where Lance is saying to Kit Green, of the CIA who supported the RV program initially, did Russell have to get permission to go over to the Soviet Union? And the kid says, well, he had to, or he'd be in jail, right? And then the next clip, Russell says, no, I didn't ask anyone's permission. I mean, I made sure I didn't share anything classified. I just wanted to go over and meet the psychics over there. So they did a 6,000-mile RV experiment with Elizabeth Targ, who later passed away in 2002 from a brain tumor.
Yes.
And but there she is in the movie, and they did this experiment with this Soviet psychic,
famous female. Yes.
Okay, so this, and they had her view something back in San Francisco. It was up here with a merry-go-round, and she got the glass eyes of the horse. All this 6,000 miles away, and it's free, folks. I'm just saying it's free. You can go to this. Just go to newcrystalmind.com or the post from my YouTube channel, Simeon Hine, the YouTube channel, Fractal Friend. And you can watch this for yourself. It's not just trying to sell you to watch Third Eye Spies. You can watch the clip for free.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So many of these events, people have to see the evidence. You really have to see how incredible these incidents are. So you don't think it's, all the other things, skeptics think it is. And that is such a great case too. And also he had an opportunity to see the results of a previous remote viewing where I forget who it was, had seen that. I think one of the premiers or someone had a secret entrance or something like that, exit in a bookshop.
Right. Oh, thanks, buddy. Thanks for that. I'm forgetting the rest of it. there's two other aspects to this special email from Russell Tard. He got to visit Brezhnev's office, which he had Hella Hamid, one of Ingo's friends, who they invited to work at SRI, who turned out to be the best viewer anyone had ever seen. Yeah, she had viewed Brezhnev's office, and Russell, when he was there, they said, anything you want to see in the Soviet Union while you're here? So I want to see Brezhnev's office. So it had the red doors with the kind of leather surroundings, and he went in, and it was exactly the way Hella had described it. There's also, by the way, pictures, which we've seen before, but it's still amazing, of Joe McMonagle's viewings of the Lawrence Livermore facility, where they had an outbounder go to that T-shaped building.
Yes.
All Joe, and it explains it a little better here, because Joe only got coordinates. The person could have been anywhere. They're back at SRI in Palo Alto. I think that's where Joe was. The Lawrence Livermore lab is outside of Berkeley. It's quite a little bit of a distance there. And he could have been in any facility anywhere in that area, I believe, in this California area. And as you remember, Buddy, he does this perfect drawing of the tree-lined roads and the T-shaped buildings. I just looked at the Lawrence Livermore facility today from another angle on Wikipedia, and it's so it's even that is a huge facility. It could have been all these different buildings, but he got exactly the building where the guy is.
The shape, the geometry of the trees, the geometry of the roads.
Yeah.
That's very, very beyond statistically, rational to believe it could be chance. But we've seen it a million times. This past 2 months, I've been involved, and even the past week, I've been involved in some really just some of the best work I've ever done. And it still stuns me every time. There was a viewing that was done. I can share this with you and everyone for fun, of Enceladus and Europa, and that there's life under both. There's microbial life. And
wait. Rewind that again. You are privy to a session about this, or are you talking about a famous session that we all know about?
I'm privy to a session. I was involved in the session.
Okay. So you said you were involved in a session where under the moons of Jupiter?
Yeah. Enceladus and
Europa
has
water planets.
Yes. Europa has this type of life. We just found it in the past, 50 years here. It's a new class like IKEA, or I forget the name of it. It's this weird new form of real basic form.
Archaic, yeah.
Like yeah, and it's an algae.
A type of eukaryote, yep.
Yeah, Europa also has the same geomagnetic flux and all the stuff that's been presumed, and that there are light fish that have bioluminescence and other things like that, real complex life under the oceans of Europa. Enceladus also has life in the form of more complex algae and things like that, but I didn't see any bioluminescent life forms. But it had the same geo stuff, and there's a lot more details in that Europa one, very specific, a lot of details at different locations.
Wow. So I just want to say to everyone, you just heard it here first, right? Buddy just shared with us some, I've never heard this before. You might have mentioned it really briefly in a text, but you're saying that you have been involved in RV sessions or privy to information that, and I've been reading about questions about this in Science Magazine. They weren't sure, but now you feel that the RV data has shown from your own involvement, you're allowed to share this with us, that there is other life in the solar system, primitive life in the solar system.
On 2 moons.
On 2 moons. Wow.
So you have to think that life can evolve in a lot of different ways, or it hopscotches a lot more than you think. I think life on Earth might have come from Mars, which came from Venus first, because Venus had the first ocean and magnetosphere, which would have protected the life and the water, and it would have hopscotched over to Mars in time to still keep the magnetosphere and the oceans there, and then it hopscotched here before it lost there. But it was only able to hopscotch in terms of natural processes of panspermia, of meteorite strikes and stuff like that, that threw small microbes into space, and creatures like tardigrades.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Here we are, life from Venus.
Or maybe even from somewhere else, from an asteroid.
I always thought you looked like a Venusian, buddy.
Yeah. Well, we could even be from another galaxy. We could be from a microbe from another galaxy that rode an asteroid. Who knows? It's so cool. We have such a dynamic universe, but we're certainly not the center of it. I think you and I know that pretty well.
Yeah, all this stuff is so fascinating. How come this isn't making the nightly news? You know, I mean, here we are on our show. We appreciate our fans, and this is amazing stuff. This is what keeps people fascinated by science and makes them want to support science. It, you know, the problem, buddy, and everyone is science has become such a government-funded enterprise that it has such a narrow set of interests and criteria agenda. It's so narrowly focused on what powerful people want to find. And it always messes it up because in the end, you find things you didn't expect to find and you discover something totally new. And as you mentioned, Galileo at the beginning, it totally switches around your view. You know this is going to happen. You know this is coming. The next big thing that's coming is realizing some piece of evidence will be released, I don't know, this year, next year, that's going to really flip our head, really say, whoa, there's life all over the place. You mentioned 2 cases right now, primitive life. The size of the universe, if you extrapolate, you know we're going to be finding, you know, more higher order, higher developed organisms that's going to totally make us realize, as you've been saying to us since the beginning of the show, that we're nothing special. I mean, we are, but we're not, right?
And other governments, the tops of other governments know that there's other life forms, know that there's multiple other species probably visiting us, maybe a council of different groups that have come together, maybe who knows what's going on. All the details are not completely well known, but I think some of us who've been doing the research for a long time, it sounds outlandish to the unlearned. To the uninitiated, it sounds preposterous. Like you think you're freaking Harry Potter on a spaceship or something? Who the heck are you, you know? But when you look at the realities of this, then if I'm nutty talking about RV and UFOs, how come the top aerospace companies, the presidents of the top aerospace companies, the top agencies, the top divisions and science projects are all pushing this envelope right now? Everything is pointing at this substructure. I mean, from quantum physics to new power sources to, I mean, the future is in this the new sciences that we're going to be learning about. There's another force. Apparently, there's like a 5th force. There's, we know about 4, but there's another force that deals with the subatomic level that helps to. I don't know all the details, but it's a subatomic force. And there's other things that we'll be finding more and more about. I've seen a video that describes how to do anti-gravity, and it's supposed to be a video from like a molecular level, a subatomic level up, and it's supposed to describe how gravity works on this new level and how to do anti-gravity. And it was supposed to be a video that goes to train people who are working in this field around the science. So who knows?
Buddy, I want to ask you a question. You don't have to answer this, but I just have to ask this, okay?
Sure.
And I don't want to frighten anyone, but if you had to guess, buddy, based on all the information you've been exposed to and all the people you've talked to, how many extraterrestrial species do you feel might be visiting our planet in any meaningful way? Do you have any gut feeling for that? Or anything you can share with us?
I kind of do, but I don't know. There's several different layers to the onion, and the rabbit hole has several caverns that open up, and you can drop down into some really deep, twisting, hypnotic caverns that can take, reality is not fixed like we think it is. Reality is not as one-dimensional as I used to think it was. Reality is a very interactive thing, and we know, Doc, that we interact with reality. We kind of co-create reality with reality. Reality has certain parameters, and when you observe reality, we know from a lot of experiments, reality says, okay, someone's observing, I have to do something within this range, let's do it. There's some people who can affect that. I think we all can affect some of that randomness, but there's some stuff coming, Doc, that I just think is, we've known it. There's mind-blowing physics coming, and I think, wow, people have been, it's just so weird to me that we have this incredible ability and we've never been told, we've always suspected. We have the deja vus. We have all the hints of this ability, but we never, no one says you have it. It's okay to explore it. As a kid, you have dreams, you dream about the future, you have, connections with people, you have all this psychic stuff, but you kind of suppress it and put it to the side. You almost discount the sense. But wow.
Well, it's so true, buddy. It's something vast is coming here. I mean, look, Robert O'Dean, who recently passed away, right? Sergeant Commander, worked at SHAEF headquarters in Brussels and told us many times, I talked to him about it personally, he saw a book with a large appendix, a description of 4 alien species visiting the Earth. He said scared the heck out of NATO because one of them looked just like us. I asked him if they were us. No one was sure, but they were here. That was in the 60s. And then we had Sergeant Clifford Stone. I don't know if some of you have ever talked to who claimed to have worked in these advanced craft recovery projects. I've run into people who've been involved with this or know people who've been involved with this and are very reliable. And so suddenly it went up to like 50 or 60 species. And the last, who?
And Colonel Halt, Indian.
Colonel Halt.
Yeah.
Okay. How many, did he mention this? How many species he thought were, what did he say?
Few different species. He mentioned, I think, like 8 different species that he was aware
Halt
of. But
from Rendlesham fame, right?
No, this is the guy from the Indian Springs. He was the meteorologist who met the
Charles Hall. Charles Hall. The
Yes.
tall whites at in Area 51 area, Dog Lake, I believe. Dogbone Lake, was that it?
No, we actually have a location. I did a video on it. I have an actual location. We did a session on the base and everything like that. The UFO base.
You did? Okay. Now, this is interesting, buddy. We've never talked about this because Hall was at one of these conferences in Laughlin, and he talked about the tall whites, Indian Springs, Dogbone Lake, and he said it looked kind of like a dog bone shaped. And he said the reason they had them there is you could see it from space. You could see this lake, and they would kind of land there. Tall whites, these very tall, blonde sort of beings. He said they could almost pass as human, and they brought them to Las Vegas.
Yeah, and they
because they got bored. The kids got bored, and they were tall and very fast. They would run, and he said they thought it was a horse. They would run together. They called it Range 4 Charlie because people would see these things running. What is out there? Wild horses, you know. So that's another species. So anyway, the point is. So many fascinating stories. So here's one scenario that could happen is we get some sort of confirmation somehow from the government or people they work with or people you work with or whoever that, hey, folks, we just want to let you know that there's a couple hundred different species. They're not that common, but they're out there. You might see them from time to time at the corner of your eye, a little shadow going.
I think it'd be really ludicrous, illogical, and really naive to assume in a universe that's really as large as our universe is, considering its age, that there's only 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and that there is undoubtedly, if there is this structure, Doc, that we know about, that we feel is a real structure, and even that other companies are looking at very seriously, and researchers are looking for, and lots of people are, maybe if, I think it may have been found several times already, maybe. But this structure allows us all to communicate. It's a lot easier to communicate across the universe now. You know, with the structure, it's a lot easier to travel. It's a lot easier to do a lot of things. So maybe we're going to have to get used to some numbers that might blow our mind. I mean, that might be almost, you know, very difficult to comprehend.
Right. It might be. I just have to share this story before we get to. We will get to some of these chat comments in a second. I'm reading them. When you see me moving away, buddy, I'm reading the comments. I ran into a guy at a Qigong seminar many years ago, and I told him what I was involved with, and you know, Qigong, Tai Chi, all that, something I've studied for a long time. He said he knew a kid in high school whose parents were real men in black, who were responsible for identifying aliens, ET aliens amongst the population. And he said, I'm totally serious. He was totally serious about this. He said they worked for one of the intelligence agencies and their job was to, just like in the movie Men in Black, to identify who the species, who they were. And he said to me that this guy's parents were always gone. They were that busy. And I never had contact with him again, but all I can remember is it could have been fictional, but it didn't sound like that to me. He was totally serious, looking me straight in the eye, and he said there are people whose job out there is to identify the ETs because they're blended in. They're blended in the population. They're your neighbor.
Well, Ingo said he saw some at the grocery store.
Oh, the grocery store. Yeah, the grocery store. We don't know. It's a whole nother story there, isn't there, with Ingo and aliens?
Different stories about this stuff. And you would think that if there was an advanced species, it would be a very logical thing for them to integrate around us, like we've talked about with the craft, with nano UFOs. A fleet of UFOs could account for almost any visual sighting we've ever talked about. A fleet of nano UFOs could be any visual phenomena we've ever seen.
What you're saying to us, buddy, is all of us listening to this show right now, we could start identifying who the ETs are by their fractal resonance.
Absolutely. We could, the best way. It would
be a certain frequency or a signature of how they relate to you. They may look at that. They would relate to you in a certain fractal way that the maybe average person wouldn't. Is that what you're suggesting?
The most accurate, best way to connect and identify them, because the technology is so advanced that we can't trust the technology. We can't trust our eyes. We can't trust our senses, our traditional senses. But we can trust the substructure. And I think if you have enough people and you do it in a formulaic way, RV and Psi is empirical. And it can be executed in a way that's really empirical. You have worked with sessions with top people, and you've seen how when you have a bunch of different top people working on a task or things like that, you can have a real super advantage in understanding by how you integrate using multiple, RVers and that information.
Right.
So I think we all have access to the info. I think we all have access to communication.
Do. I mean, this is the great, buddy, what you're suggesting here is something I really like. This is a great democratizing effect. This is what we're about, right, folks? We sort of believe in democratic republic, something like that, versus the other system. It's the worst system except for all the others, as Winston Churchill said. So this is what we believe in, is making it better, and this is democratizing to just talk about this.
Yes, and you know what, too? It really means that ultimately power is in all of our hands. I mean, I think it's such a wonderful message. And in so many different ways, this is such a wonderful message. It means we all have a lot more responsibility. Our thoughts have an impact on reality. And so we have to, I think, teach the next generation. We have a lot of new responsibilities. We're getting the car keys, at 18. So, but I think we're ready for those responsibilities. I think we can handle it.
Okay, let's go to some, good point. Let's go to some chat.
Let's do it.
First of all, Sergeant Sups wants to know, buddy, would you say the number of aliens correlates to the number of realities? What do you think about that?
Wow.
That's kind of that's a multiverse question almost.
Yeah, that's an incredibly insightful, expansive question. I mean, I don't even know where to begin answering that. I think I couldn't imagine how big that could be, but I think it's a great question. It's one of those questions that you're like, it leaves you kind of stymied, like, wow, how dynamic is our universe? How beautiful is that?
Sleuth writes, okay, first of all, Sleuth said Groom Lake. No, this just about Charles Hall. It was not Groom Lake. It was north of there, a very remote location. Buddy said he was the meteorologist. Mm-hmm. He had lived in a trailer, and it was near Indian Springs, and he said Dog Bone Lake. That's what he mentioned, because it could be seen from the air as a dog bone shape. Mm-hmm. The ships would go right into the mountain. The Air Force had built a facility for them. So I just want to correct that. But Sleuth says that she saw one at the grocery store with her husband.
No,
couldn't stop staring at this incredibly tall and graceful woman who was just a bit different. Maybe that's what we're looking for.
Well, I know a little bit extra about Super, and Super is has a very first of all, she's very gifted. I've worked with her. Her skills are really high level, and she's really understanding of this stuff. So if she says it, I take it to a certain other level of credibility. She also has a previous occupation that is widely considered, an incredibly credible occupation that people super respect for many years. So I respect Super a lot. So if Super says that, I think I remember her saying that before one time. So I'm not surprised, though.
I see Julie's on here. Julie, you told me a very interesting story over the phone about an encounter you had near your place, that your husband did. Can I repeat that story? Because I will in a second. That was a good one. It was another type of type of entity. I don't want to say it though if you don't want to share the story, but I guess it's cat's out of the bag now. So let me know.
This entity stuff, you know, I want to talk about tall whites for a second. Tall whites have been noticed by a lot of different groups, independent groups, separated from each other over time, different places. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of different species that have been kind of, you know, of course you can hear about the story from someone else and carry the story. Of course that can happen. But I think, you know, some of these species might have a little bit more credibility depending on where the information comes from, the type of caliber of the witnesses, and the consistency of the information from that high caliber of witnesses. You know, and since we're so little evidence, that's all we have to go on. It's very low caliber type of evidence, but
right.
There's still great evidence, especially for tall whites, especially for grays, especially for mantids, especially for different sizes of grays, especially for that human variety. Not so many for the blue chickens.
I have to share a story here that Colin Andrews told us once. The crop circle researcher, Colin, you know, he's written a whole bunch of books. I don't know if you ever talked with him, buddy, but he told us a story there in the crop circles near Silbury Hill on one of our tours a couple of years ago that he had, and I wrote about this in Black Swan Go, so it's public. I mean, he was at an event in DC and a woman came over and said, you know, my husband wants to say something to you, but he can't because he's a security clearance. So he's asked me to take you outside and explain what's going on. And what the story was that is this field near Silbury Hill, which is this large man-made earth mound that's 5,000 years old. You could look it up, Silbury Hill, and we go there every year. I've made some videos about it. It's the largest earth mound in Europe, man-made earth mound. And that there was a field near there where these ETs had a portal, and they came out of there, and they actually had a base in the North Sea, and this was one of the areas that they emerged from. And it turns out that there have been some ET sightings around Silbury Hill, and they were the tall white description. A couple of different people had seen these, even apparently a policeman on off duty.
You know, Ingo,
so
this stuff, it really sucks because there's people who want to research, you know, and want to help this field. And I have some stories I'd love to tell, and maybe I will someday in the future, but I don't want to sound, you know, goofy now, and I'd like to help the research and the credibility of this field, you know, but I've got some cool stories. At some point, I'd love to be able to share to some insights.
I understand, buddy. We can't always share this because you get this information from people and they don't want you to repeat it. This is the, you know, the challenge we're all working with who are in this field.
Absolutely. And Ingo made a real big decision as a talented psi practitioner. He wanted society to accept their abilities. So he went to the researchers. He rattled the scientists' cages. And he wanted the credibility of his work not to be diminished by something that was so profound that most people couldn't accept it. The ET side. He had very real ET.
It's true, but he never talked about it again. In fact, I wanted when I visited him to talk about it, but not on the first visit to his flat. I wasn't going to nail him, say, okay, tell us about the ETs. He never talked. Art Bell asked him on the show, why could he comment? He said, no. I was at conferences in Vegas, the IRVA conferences, and the question came up in Q&A. Can you comment about what you wrote about in Penetration? You know, question of human and alien telepathy, his book, which is now, again, available for reprint, not at $300 like it was before, but, you know, it's a new version.
Online too, yeah.
And he said no. He never talked about it again. And
it sucks. It really
I really wonder if he's afraid of them, if they, I don't know.
No, it's not that. He doesn't want to undermine the credibility of the research that he's brought to the table. The problem is it's tough enough to swallow the psi phenomena stuff, which he wanted people to accept all the incredible work he did. I don't think people really know how many different types of scientific experiments he was involved in, from creating balls of light on infrared film to psychokinesis attempts after attempts to RV sessions to thing after thing. And he didn't want the credibility of all that work to be damaged by the ET stuff. And I've kind of confronted that issue myself. In the past 2 months, I've had some of the most amazing experiences of my entire career.
Well, we'll have to get into this. I just want to say that Julie says it's okay to share her story. She told me this on the phone.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to share this, Julie, and you correct me on the chat if it was wrong, but this is, she and her husband live in the Southeast somewhere, and they have some swampy land as part of their property. And she told me that one night her husband saw a strobe light flashing at the bottom of their property, and he went out there armed because he wasn't sure what was going on. And if I remember this correctly, Julie, he went down there into the swampy section where normally you wouldn't go because it's swampy, and he encountered a couple beings.
Wow.
Who they weren't talking, they were making chirping, beeping sounds. Okay? This is how they were communicating, chirping, beeping sounds.
Wow.
And he felt so uneasy and so weirded out by this, he left his own property, even though he was armed. And the next morning, he went down, and this is all from memory from talking to Julie, to look for what had been down there. There was no trace of anything. He thought it might be hunters or something, but if you're hunting on someone else's land, you don't put out a strobe light. So very weird. And if there's any, so she says Alabama Gulf area. I didn't care. This is where she lives. Julie, if you want to add in something about it, that's what I remember about the story. But I mean, pretty weird, huh? Beeping, chirping sounds coming of tall beings. That what is that? What is that?
It's mantids.
From Antarctica, buddy, right?
No, oftentimes mantids are associated with chirping, clicking.
Really?
Ted Owens called his to Twitter and Tweeter because they had that kind of a little sound effect.
So you know about this species. So fill us in. I was joking with you here. This is a certain species that communicates this way?
Yeah, and they're one of the most powerful psi. They know the substructure very, very, very well and can utilize it in ways that other species can't even utilize it. And
wow.
Apparently
this is very good. I'm glad. Yeah.
It is. I never thought I would believe in the mantids, but there is a mantid type species. There are probably, it's not illogical in a universe as big as our universe to think that almost anything we could imagine is out there somewhere. The question is, how close are they to us, really? And if they've had any interactions with us. But I think, we don't know, too. You have to be really logical. Think of a society technologically advanced just 100 years more than us, 200, 500 years, and technology grows exponentially. So 2,000 or 3,000, 5,000 years from now, you almost cannot imagine the technology from a civilization like that. So you cannot trust and this goes to Jacques Vallée's point a lot about not being able to trust your consciousness. You have to be logical and presume that, you may not be able to trust some of your senses.
Right. Absolutely. That is, just think 500 years in our own development. What could we say to people 500 years ago in terms of how we look at computer? This is like, magic, right? Magic.
Well, yeah. What would people during the, Wild West would have thought of a Lexus, or a Cadillac if that pulled up.
And that's our own history. How are we supposed to imagine another civilization that could be, as Roger Lur told me, possibly 1 million years more advanced based on the isotopes of the materials that he was extracting, the implants? Oh my God, it's a whole nother subject. But just by the way, Julie adds into the story that a couple of days later, there was I remember that parallel blue beaming ship, something a couple of days later. This so much fits with what Jacques Vallée says, is that these incidents are never isolated and they're often associated with psychic phenomena that you can't distinguish. They go together. Why exactly? Well, it's a whole thing, right? But what Jacques would have asked you, Julie, because I've talked with him, he would say, did you or your husband experience anything strange a couple of days before the encounters even happened? Not afterwards. Did you notice anything around your property or something, or some synchronicity or something? Because that's the Vallée-Davis hypothesis, at least, is that these are layers, and it's not just the physical layer. The phenomena has multi-layers, and you encounter all of it, but you only easily identify the physical aspect. This is what most ufologists focus on, is the material, where it land, the trace cases, all that stuff, which is part of it, but not the whole thing.
You know, it's interesting because like you can see a light in the sky and that can legitimately be a lot of different things. Magnetic earth lights, it could be psychokinesis, it could be a light being, it could be a, you know, there's so many different things. So you know, this stuff is so cool, Doc. This is so freaking cool. I love this. You know, Reality's Edge.
Yeah, yeah. Well, buddy, I think we're going to have another episode soon. We've asked a lot more questions about this. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up tonight that we haven't talked about yet? I mean, there's just a lot more, but I feel like we've covered quite a bit right in this show. So
no, I just think it's just constantly been for me the past few months. You've known this stuff, you know, for a long time, and but to find out how interactive our universe is and how much our thoughts affect the universe, how much our feelings affect the universe, and how much we have to take kind of responsibility for our thoughts and our feelings and our intent even. And when we get angry, sometimes we get really angry at somebody and you think the worst things, and then, you know, you have to control yourself. You are a human being. You're not an animal. You have a conscious mind. You're not perfect. You know, you're not a robot. It's okay to fail, you know, if you're learning. But you know, we have to rise to this new level. We have to support each other. And I just think it's really cool that we're at this, you know, this stage when a teenager gets the car keys. It's really exciting because you get all this power, but there's responsibilities. And so I'm just kind of enthralled with that whole process right now that's happening for humanity.
yeah, I think, you know, going with what you're saying, buddy, I think the greatest threat to all the governments on the planet is that peace could break out as a result of this.
Wow.
And nobody wants that to happen who makes money from it. And, you know, it's like half of the GNP of our country is related to, well, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I'm talking about. A lot of people make money from hostilities. All these institutions only exist because of threats. And let's say the threats diminished because, as even Ronald Reagan, of all people, said, let's say we discover there's something else out there. I forgot his words exactly, a threat from space, whatever you want to put it. And we all realize we have a lot in common. There's no reason to have all these hostilities. That would really undermine a lot of these institutions. I personally believe that's why they always present it as a threat.
Yes.
Right?
You know, it's like
because threats generate revenue and power for these individuals. That's just my theory. It's not even a conspiracy theory. It's just the way these institutions work.
Yeah, but you know, the harder they try to hide it, the more it shines in psychic space.
Pat Price.
And
thank you, Pat.
And this is the ultimate democracy. And once people know that they can tap into the same substructure that extraterrestrials can, that's why RV always leads to ET. You do enough RV, it leads to ET because they're using the same structure.
Yeah, it does.
Doesn't take Socrates to figure it out.
I think what we could have, you know, that's Pat Price talking there, right? That's what someone asked him, if you could shield any of this. I forgot who asked him that. And he said that the more you try to shield it, the more it shines in psychic space.
Absolutely.
I think there's a possibility that countries as we know them could kind of slowly come to an end, because you could have people defect from their countries and realize there's a bigger galactic community.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Maybe there wouldn't be school shootings. You know, if we really had empathy for each other and we really connected with each other, you know, if we did like the Yoga Sutras, worked on virtue and empathy and connected with everything, trees and nature. If we had more empathy for nature, we wouldn't have this environmental destruction we have now. We'd have a symbiotic relationship. I think maybe it's time to get that responsibility.
I feel like John Lennon's here all of a sudden. Imagine.
Weird though. You can look at it a lot of different ways. You can say empathy and love and all that stuff, but you can also say responsibility. You know, we're getting the car keys. We're getting all these amazing powers. It just comes with the territory. You know, it's exciting time.
And it's another reason we need to kind of, and maybe this won't happen, but proceed slowly. I mean, there's a lot of things that we all value about being together in the countries that we're in. We don't want that just to dissolve. But if, you know, I mean, these things do change every 1,000 years or so. It's empires come and go, and there's different identifications, and there could be sort of a galactic identification that some of us have with a larger community. And maybe that's what a lot of these institutions are just trying to prevent from happening, is that we realize there's just more going on. And other, you know, it's all of a sudden they're not the center of it anymore. Do you know what I mean? They're not the center of the action.
Yes, but
that's what it is.
The things that they fear about RV and these abilities, they feared about the internet. And the internet, you know, yes, has powerful consequences, but it's been more incredible for humanity and done wonderful things for humanity and elevated humanity. And I think tapping into this structure, learning about this structure is going to elevate humanity tremendously. We're going to have all these incredible new responsibilities, but abilities. Our kids are going to be more talented in everything, I think. You know, our grandkids are going to be like so talented in everything. I think we're going to be kind of disgusted with ourselves. Like,
yeah, that's right. That's the right idea. We want to increase the ability and the capacities of people, have them do more meaningful things, right? And really be who, you know, we're meant to be, not these kind of limited economic commodities that this sort of system we live in is always kind of pushing us. And that's really what the story is here.
You fractal flatten us enough and people are going to pop, and their abilities
are going to pop out,
and their abilities are going to do uncontrolled abilities. You want people to have control of their abilities.
Yeah, well, that's well said. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. Is there's a rebalancing, a fractal rebalancing effect, which shows up as RV and all sorts of psychic abilities and all sorts of things that, you know, we don't even have words for yet, but we should start talking about it more with the rest of society so that it seems normal. As Ingo said, right? Normal. Yeah. This is who we are. This is what we really are.
Yeah, we really are amazing. We've been acting very subnormal. Most of us think we're subnormal, but we are really actually a lot more amazing.
All this stuff is, it's going to flip around, buddy. It's going to flip around. It's going to have to happen. I don't see any way around it.
You know, I want our listeners, you know, and our people to tell us these amazing stories. Tell us this stuff. You know, feel free, like they can tell us the amazing stuff. Be free to be their amazing stuff. To fail big, you know, tell us about your big failures, but tell us about your big successes. Because I think that's the kind of mentality we want to foster and support. And I think people have done that to us, Doc, and that helps us have great viewings and great with our other work. And I think that's how we support each other. So I guess we have to educate and uplift each other, you know, corny crap like that. Ugh.
No. So anyway, well, buddy, this has been a great episode. I think we've said enough, and I appreciate everyone's input. And stay tuned to our channels. You can always communicate with us at our respective channels. You're putting videos up again, buddy, right?
Yes, I am. And then I think our next Reality's Edge may have some interesting, some maybe even newsworthy information. So
I see. Stay tuned, folks. Well, anyway, folks, thanks again for watching. Thanks, buddy, for sharing, and we will see you all on Reality's Edge. Take care for now, and